Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from the World Senior Team Chess Championship. I'm very excited to bring you, I think, a beautiful game that was played in this round between someone from Team USA against Team Philidor Brothers, a team from France. Team USA won this match with 3.5 to half, and the game that I chose to show you today was played between candidate master Mark Kirzenberg against Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov. And I chose this game because, first of all, because of the opening, because I played with both colors. But this is not the only reason. I wanted to show that you can play a classical opening, such as the Queen's Gambit, declined, exchange variation, an opening that can sometimes be a bit too symmetrical, and have the potential to improve, sometimes wait for your opponent to make a mistake, sometimes simply improve the position. And if your opponent is not familiar with plans, you can actually outplay them and take advantage of their slight inaccuracies. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good Grunfeld or King's Indian, but you don't necessarily need to play something like that when you're playing someone who is lower rated than you. Any opening is good, I think, as long as you're following the principles, are familiar with the plans, and try to follow through with threats and ideas, and be mindful about changes that are happening in the position, specifically if the opponent makes a move you're not so familiar with. So this game continued knight c3, knight f6, takes, bishop g5. What are the plans in this variation? Well, white is delaying the development of the knight in f3. Since you're not developing the knight, what you want to do, get the bishop to g5, play e3, get your bishop out to d3, develop your knight to e2 instead of f3, then play f3 and support a push in the center with e4. Of course, white also castles, and if they get those two pawns in the center, and let's just say black chooses to capture in e4, white usually recaptures and then plays e5, maintaining two pawns in the center. And the idea is to focus on the king side, whether it's going to be by putting a battery towards h7 or putting pressure on the pawn in f7. Those are things that you have to be mindful when you're playing with the black pieces. Now, the typical plan that a lot of people is probably familiar with in the Carlsbad pawn structure, if black ends up playing c6, is with a minority attack by playing b4, a4, b5. But usually when you play that attack, you usually want the knight in f3, and you typically want it to go to e4. More recently, a lot of players tend to like to choose this line for white. So how did Grandmaster Kaidanov decide to react to this very famous plan, which I believe was introduced by former world champion Botvinnik? e3, h6. Now this is a tricky move, and you want to know exactly the reason why you play it, because sometimes it can be a weakness, because after the move bishop h4, white has new ideas to play g4, g5 and try to build an attack on the king side. So you need to be familiar with whether you're comfortable to allow that or not. Now the move h6 does avoid potential pressures on h7 with ideas of deflecting the knight from f6, and then either you would lose the pawn in h7 or there would be some mates. So that's a plus that you have, but there can be a -2. Also, sometimes if the bishop goes to d3, you won't be able to bring your bishop to g6 by following up this path with bishop g4, h5, g6, since, you know, it would be captured and you're either going to lose a pawn or mess up your pawn structure. So there are pluses and minuses to it that you need to be aware of if you're playing this opening. So what surprised me a bit, not too much, but it will definitely surprise you, and you will ask a question while watching this video, I'm sure. Black played bishop g4, right? So it's with tempo, and we're anticipating the move f3. Now, if white plays queen b3, just a small parenthesis here, we got just knight d7, and this pawn cannot be captured because after rook b8 and castle, black is going to have quite a nice play and take advantage of white's king still being in the center and having wasted a bit too many moves with the queen. So I'm sure, going back to this moment, you're going to ask yourself, Sabina, you just told us white's plan is to play f3, e4. Why are we playing bishop g4? Well, the idea is that we actually wanted to see if he would play f3. That's first of all, because now we know he's weakened his position a bit, specifically e3, which means now if they don't play e4, this pawn will stay behind and weak. So what can we do? Well, we haven't played c6. We saved one move. So now black will be able to play the move c5 and then knight c6 and put pressure in the center. And that's exactly what Grandmaster Kaidanov did. So it seems that it's helping white, but not really. White has to switch a bit the plans now. So after bishop e6, I believe there are some ideas even for white here to give this check and try to make black play c6. And there you go, bishop d3, but, well, black can still play c5. You're not going to trick us that much. But you could try. You could try and see whether they would play with c5 or not, if they're familiar with the plans. You should always test your opponent, regardless of their level. Just test what they know, especially if it doesn't change much your position. So bishop d3, and now c5. So black now, because this pawn has been weakened, decides to put pressure in the center. And now it's going to be harder for white to push e4 because they have to be mindful about the pawn in d4. And if you capture in c5, the bishop will recapture, therefore putting pressure on e3. So it's not going to be the same. White will definitely not have that idea that I mentioned to you before with the two pawns in the center. Knight g2 was played, now knight c6. It's much nicer to have the knight developed in c6 than it is to have it in d7, which is more typical for these types of positions. What you see, castle, and now white made this prophylactic idea, king h1. This move can be helpful in various ways. One of them is to move the king away from the diagonal so that you can consider potentially capturing in c5, but also you can think of playing g4, g5 maybe. And you move the king from the g file, so maybe your rook can switch over to the g file and help an attack. Specifically, if black captures in d4 and the pawn recaptures, the center will be quite stable, and there won't be easy ways for black's bishops to actually reach white's king. That's the reason why you can afford, with the center not fully closed, to weaken your king side. But in this position, black played rook c8, and I think white missed some opportunities here. I would probably have played a move like queen d2, maybe put my rook on d1 or e1, one of those files. Definitely not, I don't believe I would put it on c1, but we definitely want it out, because in some situation when the knight plays to b4, we definitely want to be able to retreat the bishop to b1. And then I would consider a plan to push g4 personally. But instead of this, white decided to go rook c1, and I think from here on, it seems to me, I could be wrong, and I don't like to make statements that I'm not super sure about. So this is my opinion only, and I believe that white, paying attention to the rating difference, has chosen to play a bit too cautious and has chosen to keep the position equal. And a big advice that I want to give you, that I hope it will benefit you, is when you're playing someone stronger, please don't play for a draw. Try to play the position that you have on the board. Playing for a draw, I've done it many times and it backfired, I promise. Well, I don't want to promise you, but it happened. It simply backfired, and you want to try to play the position you have on the board. If you're slightly better, try to play for the advantage. Don't be afraid. There's always going to be another game that you'll play. There's so much learning that can happen. And who says you cannot win against someone who is stronger than you? Nobody says that. It's just a game. It's just two players playing a game, and anyone can make a mistake. So if you're slightly better, if your plan, if the position requires, it's inspiring you to do something that, continues improving it, then please do that rather than choosing more equalizing kind of moves. Gregory captured in d4, pawn took, and now he played rook e8. He's simply making sure that all of his pieces are well developed before considering how to improve them further. And now knight a4. So see, white has decided to play, in my opinion, on the wrong side of the board. I don't think this is the side where white wants to play. There are even ideas with some f4, f5, but rather, you know, something that I like more is to try to follow through with g4. So let's see how the game continued. Knight b4 with tempo. We're happy to trade. Bishop b1, and now black traded. And see why this is such a nice idea, because after the knight took, the knight retreated to c6, and when knight c5 was played, black freed up the c8 square. So he traded a piece that he knew wasn't going to do much, and now the bishop can retreat to c8, keep the pawn in b7 protected, and black can focus kind of on the e-file center, potentially h2. We don't have a knight in f3, the pawn is pushed. The position is somewhat weakened. You can't push it further because then you will definitely allow some knight g4, knight e4. So, well, black can focus towards the king side. And the next few moves that white played, again, show a bit of unsureness of what they can do. I think the knight in c1 is definitely a piece that needs improvement, so we have to figure out where to place it. In d3, it would block the bishop, so maybe we can consider bringing it towards c3 or maybe g3, since very likely black will play bishop d6. Maybe we can consider trading the bishop and bringing the knight there. Also, some knight f5, bishop f5 could be possible. But bishop f2 was played, bishop d6, and now in a next couple of moves, black has completed their development, and after knight d3, he played bishop f5. You see how the queen came to c7, keeps the pressure in h2, and now this pawn is going to be protected by the queen, so we can finally improve the position of the last piece that didn't come into play yet. So bishop f5. Now, please, please, please do not fall for this trap. There's a very famous game that maybe some of you who are watching are familiar with, where Fischer got his bishop trapped just like this. g3 is the move that seals the deal in a way almost. And you can try to be fancy with knight takes d4, try to deflect the bishop, or play some hope chess that they take your bishop and then you can, you know, kind of fork them. But no, it's not going to happen. In this position, white has this very strong move, queen e5, which I admit I did find this move with the engine, but it's kind of gorgeous. I had to show it. And the idea is, if you choose to trade, we recapture, the knight protects f3, and the bishop is still trapped, and now black has two pieces hanging. And if you choose not to take and just try to be fancy with bishop takes g3, then white can recapture. You still have to trade now. Your queen is under attack, and we don't take with the bishop, we take with the knight. The knight protects f3, and we have a much better position for white here. The pawns that black has for the piece, I don't believe are sufficient to keep equality, and black's pieces, specifically this bishop in c8, is quite passive. So going back to the game, bishop f5 was played, improving the position of the bishop, and it is in this moment, after bishop h4, knight d7, that white made a blunder, probably misunderstanding and just wanted to trade everything. They miscalculated what happened here, so they traded the bishop. That's their bad bishop, so in its way it's not a mistake, but it's the next move that really makes white's position really inferior, because they lose material, and that move was knight e5. That's why I felt that white was trying to play a bit too much for equality, because they attempted a bit too many trades, and after knight e5, the bishop captured in b1, and now if you recapture with the queen, knight takes e5, pawn takes e5, queen takes e5, and we're up a pawn. And if you try an intermediate move, intermezzo, Zwischenzug, in between, whichever one of those four words you want to use, feel free to do so. Be sure to do a lot of tactics with those, because those are easy things to miss. Knight takes c6, now bishop takes a2. We escape with the bishop by capturing a pawn. We don't take, right? This is what an intermediate move is. You want to take, but you realize if you do, they take your bishop, and you haven't won anything. So that's why you go for bishop takes a2. You win a pawn. Now this knight is under attack and you escape with the bishop from the attack. They give you a check. You go king h8 and you are up material. And from here on, it was kind of a matter of technique after for Grandmaster Kaidanov to seal the deal. He played b6, chased the knight away, and now knight e6. I loved how he slowly improved the position. He's not in a rush to take the bishop out. The bishop can come out. It's not going to be trapped. Knight c6, bishop b3. The bishop is slightly better than the knight. I mean, I think he could have probably just taken, and after knight takes, maybe he could go queen g5 or something, or queen f6 to put pressure on this pawn and try to take it. Of course, he had to escape the pin. But, okay, you know, it's bishop b3 is more of a natural human kind of move. You have the bishop is slightly better than the knight, white traded off. And the game continued as follows. Knight e7 is hanging again, queen h4. They repeated the position twice, but listen, we are up material, we're not going to take the draw, right? Knight takes d4, knight d5, and now this beautiful move, knight takes f3. Another Zwischenzug. Lots of Zwischenzug ideas in this game, which I hope you guys enjoyed. Queen h3, and now bishop takes d5, pawn takes f3, and queen e6. I think there are various ways for black to win, but Grandmaster Kaidanov chose this one, bishop c6, and now king h7. I love when games finish with a move by the king to bring it towards the center, because it's an end game. And now the beautiful final finish, because we had to finish with some kind of a pin, queen g4 check, and his opponent resigned. So I certainly hope you enjoyed this game. It was a pleasure bringing it to you. Don't forget to follow US Chess. Give us a thumbs up or comment below if you have any questions, if you're enjoying these videos, if you want to see more, so that we can know what kind of content to bring in the future. Don't forget to follow US Chess on all the social media accounts. And I can't wait to see you in the next video. If you haven't followed the previous 2 games, you can do so in the link somewhere. There will be a link. Thank you for watching and see you very soon.